Staffing for summer camps. What a hot button topic this has been in 2021. Folks couldn't get staff, keep staff, or found the summer more draining than ever, helping staff make it through the season. This episode focuses on part 2 of our discussion on how we can give our staff the best experience possible and how that helps us deliver our best program ever.
Do you ever feel like you're spending so much time at the office that you have no time left for camp? With Ultra Camp, you can track attendance, manage staff applications, and streamline registration so you'll be back outside in no time. Find out more at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode.
Welcome to Camp Code, a podcast brought to you by Go Camp Pro. We have created and are dedicated to this podcast because we believe that staff training is one of, if not the most important part of your job as a camp director. Staff training is what prepares your staff to care for their kids, to feel confident in their skills, to do their jobs to the best of their ability, and to learn along the way. A well thought out and intentional staff training will help you in more ways than you can imagine. And we need to help each other bring our very best. There are a lot of important topics to cover this season, and today we're going to be focusing on one that is absolutely crucial. But before we dive in, we're just going to take a moment to introduce ourselves. So Gabrielle, let's start with you.
Thanks, Beth. My name is Gabrielle Rail, and my pronouns are she and her, and in French, elle. And I work at Camp Aura, which is an all-girls camp in the Laurentian Mountains, and we focus on creating a positive environment for gender minorities.
Thanks, Gab. And I'm Beth Allison. My pronouns are also she and her, and I'm co-owner of Camp Hacker and Go Camp Pro. As a camp consultant and trainer, I build on my experience as a director and executive director and my 44 summers at camp. And my passion is building solid, supportive, and purposeful communities through intentional and thoughtful leadership training. And if you are watching us on YouTube, you will have already noticed that we are once again missing Ruby today. Mm-hmm. She is still outside with students. So she is on a second 2-week trip and enjoying some time with, I believe, 8th graders out in the wilderness and on the water. So we will miss her terribly yet again, but she promises to be back for our next podcast. So yes. Gab and I are going to take the reins and hopefully do Ruby proud. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're all only too well aware of the staffing issues that camp struggled with this summer. It was really rough for a lot of directors and for their leadership teams. And what we'd like to discuss today is the fact that we don't think it was all just due to COVID. We think in some ways COVID and all of its issues only exacerbated an already growing problem in our industry. So as you've heard us say many, many times, we need to put a ton of effort into staffing and hiring, and specifically this year. And of course, we have to do it with really great intention. So we talked last episode about how to better pay for staff, how to tweak our programs to better support our staff. Today, Gab and I want to dive into what we can do better now to prepare folks to apply to camp and to be more ready for all the summer will entail in 2022. Mm-hmm. So Gab, I know that we constantly talk about front-loading information and setting expectations right from the get-go so that staff can make the best decisions about applying. But what specifically does that look like for you this year, especially in terms of what we've been talking about in this and our last podcast? So in lieu of how hard last summer was for so many people, what ideas does Camp Waro have this year as you begin to think about hiring, creating staff applications, finding that right fit for you?
Gathering information from our staff members from last year and previous years. How can we make your summer a better summer, and how can we support you better? It's starting with a survey to all of our current staff members and a survey to previous staff members. There's 2 main reasons why we want to do this. One is to truly find out where are some of the spaces on camp that we can better support our staff. And as we said in our previous podcast, a lot of these comments or recommendations are actually quite achievable, that cost little to no money, and it's more of a scheduling mathematical genius person could figure out. So it's to really gather that information, things that I've missed and things that I have never thought of before. For example, last summer, when we had opening day, typically our staff members have approximately an hour and a half off every single day. And on opening day, we just don't have it because, it's opening day and then we all get together and et cetera. And this year, a couple of staff members came forward and said, hey, it would be really nice if we had some time off that day. And sure enough, I was able to rearrange our schedule for the next opening day, and we were able to get 2 hours off. And it was just better managing our time. And I think that just because it's been done always that way, as we've said before, there's room for improvement. So first, it's asking our staff members, where are some of the blind spots and how could we adjust if they have any thoughts, and they don't any suggestions. They don't have to have solutions. Just we're pointing out the issues, I think is enough. And the second reason why we want to do that is that it shows that we're actively listening and actively caring in the process. And that leads to engagement in our staff. And anytime you can get engagement in your staff, it gets them back to thinking about camp. It gets them back to thinking about their experiences at camp and hey, this is a place that I did enjoy and I probably want to go back to. It also leads to further conversations if they want to be part of that problem solving piece, if they do want to be part of the development piece, which is always helpful. And then because you have that small committee that's working on it, they're talking to their friends about these shifts and why it's amazing. And one of the things that I learned from this summer, even when I tried to, or my leadership team tried to do some positive shifts, there were still some prickly reactions. Even if it was to give more time off or to have a special meal time for the staff members, we did get some resistance. And so involving more people in that process is extremely helpful. So once we do that, then we can also share that information with new staff members. This is what we've done this year. This is how we're constantly trying to evolve our organization and see that this organization does care about our staff, because if you care about your staff, they care about your kids. And that's the whole purpose of camp.
And that's great. And so important. This generation of staff wants to feel like their voices are being heard.
Sure.
And so, and rightly so. And at this time of year, gathering that information will help you make better decisions later. So I think that's brilliant. Have you started to send these out already?
We have started in small groups specific to specific jobs of camp. So yes, we have started to send them out. And I've also personally contacted some people to say, hey, this is in your mailbox. Check it out. See if your friends are interested. This is the seed that was planted this summer that we were going to do this anyways. And that was something that my team unanimously was interested in responding to. Of course, we have our summer check-ins and check-outs. And so we gather some of that information. But as I mentioned to them, let's let the dust settle. Let the dust settle, come back to it, a little bit of a clearer head.
Time to process a little.
Time to process, exactly. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that, if you're not part of the developing the change, you don't see all of the intentionality behind it. And this summer, when we were implementing change, we did create small committees of people that were first-year staff members, young staff members, veteran staff members, a group of representatives that could be, as we say in French, a porte-parole, somebody that could speak for the rest of the group and give their 2 cents. And what was interesting about this is that in those discussions, some of those individuals would say, oh, it's not that big of a deal if we ask everybody to wake up 10 minutes early. And then I would say, oh, that's adorable that you think that our team's not going to be frustrated with this. And so they, I said, imagine if I just came and told you out of no context, you're getting up 10 minutes early. How would you feel? And that 18-year-old who I adore, of course, thought for a second, and she was like, cool, Gab, I see what you're saying. That's right. They might be a little frustrated. So then they're like, wow, this takes actually a lot of work and takes a lot of thought. But then they know every other decision that we're making, we're going through the same process. And I think that what we're really talking about here is that camp does need to change. COVID has taught us, some good lessons, some things that we could do differently. But I think our staff are different as well. So camp is going to change, and that we can't escape. So how do we make that positive for our staff members? How can we bring them in the process? And of course, in the end, what's happening is we're building trust with them.
Perfect. Thank you. I also think it's imperative to make it exceptionally clear that not only is this a hard job, make the expectations match reality, as Gab always tells us, but also that your camp is doing everything in your power to support staff and help them thrive in this environment. So I would absolutely highlight any changes that you're making, that Gab's gathering and getting the information and the ideas from these surveys. Make sure you're highlighting those changes to any of your returning staff applicants prior to the application date being due. By sharing how you value their work, how you understand the rigors of the job, and how a focus of training this year will be on developing coping skills and providing tools to give them more confidence in their abilities, adding in a copy of the schedule that shows breaks or times off that they will receive if you've added more or figured out ways to do that. Those kinds of things. You'll be showing them how much that you care for and support your people, and it'll help them to decide if this is the right fit for them. Gabs has often told, if you've ever heard us speak, a story of Ernest Shackleton, and how many times she's told it so many times, and the way in which he never sugarcoated his adventures. And I think it's still an incredibly important piece to be honest and upfront with staff about the job that they would be undertaking prior to being hired. But, and for me, this is where I used to end it in my application and hiring process, was like, let's be honest, let's be upfront. This is really going to be hard. Are you sure you're up for it? Now, I think it's imperative to also be incredibly intentional about sharing the fact that you realize these past 2 years have been difficult on everyone. And here are the ways that you as a camp have come up with to be there for them, to guide them, to teach them to persevere, and so on. Show them very specifically what's in it for them. What are they going to learn by their summer at camp? How will they grow? What skills will they acquire? Name them, like specifically name the skills. Many of us have started doing that piece, but I would also add this year how you're going to care for them in their time at camp and beyond. I think I focused a lot on the front loading part. So here's what the job entails. These are the expectations. Here's what you're going to get out of it, of course, including the chance to make a real difference in the lives of so many children. But if I were sending out staff applications now, I'd have a whole section on here about here's how we're going to care for you at camp. Here's how we value your time, your presence, your gifts, your needs. Gab and I talked last podcast about asking former staff for their ideas about how to make this experience better in the summertime, particularly in lieu of how strained and anxious the world is these days. So as Gab said, she's surveying her staff. Maybe you want to create a think tank, get their ideas, ask them what would entice folks to apply and what they would need to hear and understand before they did. So before we continue with some ways to bring this thinking into staff training, here are some words about our amazing sponsor. Hey friends, do you remember your why for getting into camping in the first place? I'm guessing it didn't involve sitting in front of a computer screen clicking in a database. Sometimes all the busy work and button clicking associated with running camp keeps us from seeing why we are there. That's why we encourage you to get to know our friends at UltraCamp. UltraCamp helps you get back to spending time remembering why you love working at camp. How do they do this? UltraCamp takes the stress out of using their registration software. With UltraCamp, you don't have to worry about limits. UltraCamp offers unlimited custom reports, unlimited support, unlimited training, unlimited users. And if you think this all sounds too good to be true, friends, it is real. visit ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. And our friends at UltraCamp would love to show you a future where you finally have the time to get back to what's really important, running camp. Visit their website, ultracampmanagement.com/campcode, and set up your time to chat. Okay, Gab, was there anything else that you wanted to add about things you're doing right about now? Or should we move on to the next question?
Well, I just want to add with the front load and then what does support look like? I find that so important. And I think I just got away with front loading all these years. And I was like, self high five, crushing it. I just front loaded. So there we go. My job is done. They know what's expected. I love the aspect of, and what does support look like? I think there's also a space to talk about what does support look like and what does support not look like? And to, yes, all these things we can do, but also talk about the patterns that you've seen in the past from staff, where this is the way we create a safe space to bring up concerns. Here are your times to bring up your concerns. Here are the different areas to bring up your concerns. Here's some of the exercises we do to do self-check-in. Where do you feel concern in your body? Like all of these things we do. But if you don't speak up, if you don't come forward, or if these are ways that don't work for you, how can we get around that? What's a way to get around that? And to make it a partnership, a little bit more of a partnership when it comes to support with our staff members, so that they also know that there is some expectation for support. We need both parties to sort of meet, not always in the middle. I'm fine with doing some extra lifting. I don't mind. But to understand that, what are camp's capabilities and be transparent about that as well.
I love that piece. That's an excellent extra piece. Okay, so we've got them hired. It's next spring.
Love it.
What can we do to prepare to train our staff so that they feel more supported, more ready to take on the challenges of camp, and see them through to summer's end? Gab, what ideas have you got to make this a focus of staff training in 2022?
So this is not new. I think it's not new by all means, but I think that we can revamp this. I would like to challenge camps to have staff members write their CVs at the beginning of staff training, write their resumes, write what they have done and what they have accomplished. They learn their job and then they write their resume. And then that's followed up by an alumni or a leadership team member with a group, and we fill in the gaps. And I think that this is a way of almost seeing the flag at the end of the race or at the top of the mountain. And it also, I think, fills in the gaps of these are the things that you're going to be doing, and these are the things that you'll gain from doing these actual, activities or programs or small group leadership. A lot of camps this summer are going to be starting their summer journey with a lot of new staff members. Either they've skipped a year at camp, or their camp had 2 years of a gap piece, or it's just brand new people, or they were 14 last time and now they're 16 running into your CIT program. There's a lot of gaps that are being filled in. I would challenge us to for our staff training to look at how do we inform our staff as much as possible, get them to write their CV, and then have a mentor sit down with 3, 4, 5 people. You can even do this on Zoom if people can't come in, and fill in the gaps and talk about, the hard work that goes in, but these are the results of that hard work. And I think it also will paint a nice picture of what their summer is when they do it this way. And this is something then they can share with their family, their friends, and even though some of those parents are telling them get a real job, they say, hey, look, this is what I'm going to be doing this summer.
And a great thing to follow up with at summer's end and say, are there any other skills that you've acquired over the course of this summer, and how can we tweak this a little bit before you go back to school or out into a different kind of job for the fall? So,
and it helps,
really good support.
Exactly. And it also helps your supervisory staff to know what kind of experiences do you want to give your staff members. You know, some of us are jack of all trades. We're great on stage. We're good at organizing things. We're lifeguards. We're all of the things. And so where can you create space to help staff members learn how to do conflict resolution with campers, get them to lead a song, just one song up on stage, or lead one part of an activity, perhaps it's the rules and regulations, because these are things that we want to make sure that they have experience on. So I think it also helps those support supervising staff to know, what kind of guides are they giving their team that summer.
Perfect. I also think that talking about mental health and coping skills and how difficult the past few years have been will be a crucial part of any training in 2022. I think it's totally important to be honest, upfront, name the emotions that you had this past summer. Of course, not mentioning any details or specific incidents that may have driven you to these emotions, but just ones which existed for you. Maybe you could have some staff prepped ahead of time next summer during training to share some of their emotions from last summer. And I think this could also lead into some small group discussions about some of the challenges folks have had over the pandemic in terms of mental health. And I would front load this by saying it doesn't have to be personal sharing, but things that you've noticed going on in the world or with friends. And of course, you're not going to mention any names. And now what I think we want to do is, now that we've named that elephant in the room, is to let your staff know that you're prepared to do something about it. So you've already front loaded some of this in your application process, but you want to work with them through training and let them see how this process is going to work out. So there are many ways that you can set up extra supports for the summer, and many of them, of course, should be in place for folks before training starts. And we talked about a number of those in the last episode. So now's the time to be sure that everybody understands what they are, like any floaters that you've hired and how that will work, or the therapist or the social worker or head counselor that you have on staff this year who's there for that sounding board and that listening ear. And now is also the time in training to get them to creatively work on other ideas to help each other. And I just came up with a few off the top of my head. So together as a group during training, you could make a list of 50 ways to take a break at camp. Put them into small groups and share this as a whole, whittle it down to 50, print it up, laminate it, post it around camp. So just things like 5 deep breaths, or sit in nature, or engage in small acts of kindness, or put on some music and have an impromptu dance party. You could create a post of 99 coping skills for when you feel overwhelmed, and whatever works at your camp. You can make a list of things like yoga, or putting a puzzle together, or playing with kids, or giving facials, or drawing on yourself with washable marker, make sure it's washable, or building a fort, or praying or meditating, or lying on your back and studying the clouds, singing, journaling, and post these lists around camp too. And you can make them fun with drawings or photos, or if you happen to be like Gab and have great skills, you can make the posters look fancy and fun and all of that. You can do a session on positive self-talk. Talk about the fact that you can retrain your brain and change your thinking by having positive self-talk. It isn't easy at first, but when we get used to it, the more we use it, it gets easier. So we want to be able to practice during leadership training. And positive self-talk is a strategy that we can use to help us get through those anxiety-provoking situations. It helps us break stress up, and it involves focusing on positive rather than negative statements. I found some great stuff online just Googling coping skills and positive self-talk. So there's a ton of free information out there for you to choose from and create sessions with. So for example, I learned that there are 3 key stages to positive self-talk: preparation, coping, and review. As we're about to enter a situation or face something that we find daunting, we can help ourselves to prepare with positive statements like, it's not going to be as bad as I think, or it's not going to last that long and I can cope, or I'm getting better and I need to work on rebuilding my confidence. Those kinds of things. I might enjoy it if I just go, whatever you can come up with. So you can put staff in groups and have them come up with these kinds of sentences. In order to help us cope, which is stage 2, and stay in the situation, we can use positive statements like, Concentrate on what I'm doing right now, not on how I'm feeling, or concentrate on what I have to do. I know I'm going to be okay. Relax and think positively, one step at a time, all these things that we can retrain our brain to tell ourselves. And then the third part is review. So here are some examples of comments to help you review your achievement and give yourself praise. So I achieved that. I'm getting better, or I handled that and it'll be easier next time. Or I'm really pleased with the progress I'm making. If I keep this up, I'm going to get really good at it. So even when things don't go according to plan, we should still take time to review that situation and praise ourselves for what we have achieved. Each step is progress, even if it's a small one. So we want to retrain our brains to focus on the positives rather than the negatives. And I think this should be an important part of staff training this year. You can then put staff into small groups, get them to come up with those statements in each of the 3 positive self-talk categories: preparation, coping, and review. And once they're done, you can, pair them up and get them to pick a partner and practice. Help Guide has 6 keys to mental health. So they are social connection, staying active, managing stress, brain healthy diet, quality sleep, and meaning and purpose. And you can find all of this information on helpguide.org. helpguide.org. And each category has a really good explanation and a short list of ideas to cope. So you could divide your staff into 6 groups, give each one part of that really short article, ask them to assess it, and figure out how they can make this stuff work at camp. Adolescentwellness.org has great supplemental activities for youth for building coping skills. So that's adolescentwellness.org. Run a session where staff become the campers, do one of the activities, and debrief it. What did they learn? How can they use it this summer for themselves or for their campers? PositivePsychology.com has 10 plus coping skill worksheets, both for adults and for youth, and they have PDFs that you can download and print out. So you can work through one of them. You can discuss how these ideas can help them with their campers, and then share how the adult worksheet can help them through some of their difficult moments. My point is, this fall and winter, start collecting resources and make it a large part of training this coming season. Label it, share how important it is, make it comfortable for them to talk about mental health and stress and coping and burnout, and come up with solid plans for them to deal with it when it does. And I think that'll get us a little bit further ahead. Do you have anything to add, Gab, before we go to recap?
Well, for me, for that last, thank you for that last piece. What mental wellness is so important. And I think that with your staff members is to have that conversation between the differences between positive self-talk, which is truly being kind to yourself. That's what it is. And It's not ignoring the negative feelings that you have or the anxiety. It's being kind to yourself. And to create that distinction. But there's certain courses that you can take also to train yourself in mental wellness, first aid for your running your camp. I think that's something that's worth looking at, but making that distinction and then giving the tools. I don't see any camp not benefiting from that. I think it's just, or any organization for that matter.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. All right, Gab, we're ready for your recap.
Okay, everybody. First and foremost, just looking forward to having Ruby join our team in our next podcast. So without further ado, our recap for today is build trust by bringing staff into and onto change management. You can start with just a simple survey. Ask them, once the dust has settled, where can we do better? How can we support you? And speaking about supporting, we all know that front loading is very, very important, but let's add on that little extra piece that's called, and what does support look like? And also, how can we partner yourself, staff, and us as the organization in making sure you get the best support for your summer? We would also maybe ask that you challenge your staff members or your staff training team to do their CV/resume at the beginning of staff training, perhaps a couple of days once they have a better idea of what their job entails, and then have a mentor such as an alumni or leadership team member help fill in the blanks so they have a better understanding of what is expected of them this summer, but also what they're going to gain from the summer. And last but not least, let's look at mental wellness. There's a great challenge, 50 ways to take a break at camp. I'm sure we can come up with a lot of ideas and some very interesting ones that we could share together, and look at positive self-talk. And adolescentwellness.org seems like a great place to start your search on creating a better camp with better mental wellness.
Great. Thanks, Gab. So I think
No
what we've been
problem.
saying these last couple of weeks is take the time now to
Mhm.
figure out how you can change up your application process, your hiring process, your interviewing process, your staff training to really focus on caring for these people and not assuming that we can just say the pandemic is behind us. Hopefully we get to say that next year. And so we're going back to our old ways. I think we need to really do this for our people and for our camps. All right. And before we wrap up with our best practice this week, here is how folks can connect with us and get involved in the conversation. Of course, our hashtag that you can use is Camp Code, and let us know any topics you'd like us to discuss, guests you would recommend that we talk to, great leadership training tips that you have to share. We would love to hear from you. We are all about sharing in this industry, and you can get involved, of course, by using hashtag Camp Code. And if you found this podcast to be useful, we would love it if you could leave us a rating and a review in your podcasting app. It helps to keep the show going. And we love our reviewers so much that we will share your reviews right here on our podcast. And here's how you can get in touch with us if you'd like to get in touch with just one of us. Gab, how do we get in touch with you?
You can check out where I work at waro.com. You can email me at info@waro.com, OUAREAU.com, or you can check me out on Instagram at Gabrielle Rail, and Rail takes 2 L's.
Thanks, Gab. And she has some great Instagram content, so you should check her out there. You can email me at beth@gocamp.pro. I am on Instagram at topaz_Faye and on Twitter at Topaz. And for our next podcast, it's going to be a surprise because we need to talk with Ruby about it more specifically. So we will decide that when we get her back. So tune in, but I guarantee you it's going to be something about staff training.
Yep.
This week's best practice will be brought to you by me. So during staff training this year, why not take some time to create a coping skills toolbox? It is a great way to get staff thinking not only about how they will cope, but also that they will need to cope, that it's part of the job, and that it's great role modeling for their campers, and how it shows how much your camp cares about its people. So a coping skills toolbox is an idea that I came across from Baldwin County Public Schools in Alabama. So shout out to Baldwin County Public Schools. They have great resources on their website, which is bcbe.org. And this one comes with a downloadable PDF. And a coping skills toolbox is a physical place for you to keep things that calm you down in periods of distress. So if you have everything kind of gathered in one place, it's easier to remember to use your coping skills rather than maybe fall into some negative behaviors. So the toolbox is a collection of your various favorite and healthy items that you can use when you're feeling anxious or panicky or distressed. And it can be used for those times when staff need to help them get help them get through some sort of anxiety or some sort of distressed situation. And because there are nearly an infinite number of ways to cope, it's not necessarily important whether you cope like everybody else does. All that matters is that you find effective coping methods that'll help you build resilience and be able to thrive. So there are 5 categories with questions attached that ask staff to fill their toolbox with things that are important to them. So the first one is self-soothing. So how can you comfort yourself through your 5 senses? For example, you can put something in your box that you like to touch, like a stress ball or a stuffed animal. You can put in something that you like to see, so maybe happy photos. Your second category is distraction. So something that's going to take your mind off things for a while. So things like knitting needles or puzzles or crafts. Their third category is emotional wellness or tools to identify and express your feelings. So this could include a chart of emotions or a journal and a pen or art supplies. Number 4 is mindfulness. So something to center and ground yourself. Objects like a rock or meditation recordings or a yoga mat. And number 5 is a crisis plan. So who at camp do you go to when your coping skills are not enough. So you could work on all 5 of these things at camp, or you could have all your staff bring things from home for those first 4 categories and maybe share some of the contents with partners or discuss other ways that camp can help staff cope and so on. And then, of course, you fill in number 5 together. Who do they go to at camp when their coping skills are not enough? The boxes may be something you give them. Maybe you allow them time to decorate them during training. And of course, they should be available to them at all times throughout the summer. So you need to keep them, maybe in their cabins or their lockers or your staff lounge, whatever works for your camp. I thought it was a great tool. It's an excellent discussion starter to kind of talk to your staff about the fact that they're going to need some coping skills through the summer, and it's okay to have those and really healthy. And it's something they could do with their campers too. So we thank you, Baldwin County Public School, for this really great idea. So that wraps things up for today. Camp Code is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network, and you can check out all of our other amazing podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcasts. There are incredible people with very sage advice in those podcasts, so look them up and give them a listen. And from all of us here at Camp Code, thanks for the listening, friends.